everyone, this is Rachel. Thanks for clicking on my video. And I came in today to talk about the Houston family. I don't know if you guys heard that Gary Houston, I believe he is Whitney's oldest brother, was found in a car unconscious and high as a kite off drugs. Now, let me just give you what the story is saying. So evidently someone observed Gary going into a well-known drug house buying $200 worth of heroin. They say that he came out, got in his car, and apparently, I guess he shot up right there in the car. And he was found slumped over, unconscious. Now, they say that he was that way for several hours, I guess, before, he came to or whatever happened. Y'all, this Whitney, this Houston family, I got to come to terms with they got some problems. And I also have to come to terms with something that I'm guilty of doing years ago. And that was blaming Bobby Brown for, Whitney Houston's problems. And I know Bobby Brown will never hear my video, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry because it is very obvious that Whitney Houston's problems were stemming from her family. Now we all know that there was an interview that Whitney Houston's mother did with Whitney Houston's brother Michael, and Michael admitted that he was the one that got Whitney started on drugs. Now, on this interview, he was crying and he was saying that he was sorry because what he ultimately introduced her to, or what he introduced her to, ultimately is what took her out of here. Now, in that interview, he admitted that he was still on drugs, battling back and forth. And now, Whitney Houston's other brother, Gary, we're finding out that he's been on drugs. And I don't think Gary Houston's problems are anything new. I believe these three were getting high together. So that brings me to Bobby Brown. Now, let me just backtrack a little bit. When I was younger, I was, Lord, y'all, the biggest Whitney Houston fan. Whitney Houston is about my age. She's a couple years older. So when Whitney was in her heyday, she was the background music to my life. All during my 20s and 30s when Whitney was singing those love songs, they kind of coincided with what was going on in my life as a young 20, 30 something year old woman. So I grew up with Whitney, I watched her, be introduced to the world. I watched her skyrocket to fame. I watched her marry Bobby Brown. I watched her be in movies. And then I slowly watched Whitney Houston decline. And y'all, what I must say is I am angry with Whitney. I am angry because God gave her that amazing, beautiful voice. It was a gift. It was like God touched her throat and said, "You will sing. That is your purpose in life." And she took that gift and she threw it away, messing around with drugs. You know, her family, her background. We found out that Whitney Houston's parents were very strict, and specifically her mother. Being in the church and all of that. From what I'm understanding, she sheltered Whitney and those kids from a lot, and didn't allow them to do a lot. So what I believe happened is like some church kids when they got out there. Whitney, Michael, and Gary, they went motherfucking crazy, y'all. They got out there and were trying everything, I guess, to make up for what they weren't allowed to do when they were teenagers, probably, and young people. And for years, y'all, for years, I must admit, I was in that camp that was blaming Bobby for everything. And what I realize now is Bobby came to that marriage with his own set of problems. I believe that Bobby was a dabbler in drugs before he got with Whitney. I believe he probably had tried cocaine a few times. I believe that, he was, a big weed smoker and probably drank. But I believe that when he got with Whitney, Whitney was a dabbler too. She was this big star. She had access to everything. People were throwing it at her. And I believe that when those two got together, they were toxic for each other. I believe that Whitney Houston, and it hurts me to say this because I love that girl so much. I believe that she pulled Bobby in a little deeper than what he probably was in drugs. Now, the reason why I say it hurts me to say that is because for years I believed that it was Bobby. But what I have come to realize is maybe not. Now, I'm not going to excuse Bobby for some of the things that happened when those two were together. There were allegations that, they were fighting and he cold cocked her a couple of times, but I also believe that Whitney was a strong woman. And if he fought her, I believe she fought back. If he spit in her face like she alleged alleged in that Oprah Winfrey interview, I believe that she got him back. So what I'm saying is, I believe with those two, it was tit for tat. He fucked with her, and she did something to fuck with him back. I believe that those two truly loved each other, but they had a very, very troubled relationship. And it's, now in hindsight, with everybody all on drugs and Whitney dying and Bobby Christina dying, when you look back over their relationship, y'all, this shit is sad. And it's it's almost disgusting because the Houston family, Cissy Houston could sing, Whitney sang, her brother Gary sang. That was a talented family. And then I wanted to talk about her mother. I believe that Cissy Houston, she was a woman that was in church. She had her strong beliefs in certain things. And from what my mother tells me about Cissy Houston, she was a very respected singer. Never to the level of her daughter. But my mother tells me that there were never any scandals with Cissy Houston. Basically, whenever a singer, a big time singer back in the day needed a background singer, they went and got Cissy Houston because they said she was reliable, she could sing her ass off, and she added something, her voice added something to their songs. So when she introduced her daughter to this music industry, Cissy Houston knew everybody. So she knew how to get Whitney to the people that would change Whitney's life and put her voice out there. And she did the best that she could for her daughter when it came to that music industry. But something Whitney said in an interview, it sticks with me. Whitney said that at one point her mother was, trying to get her to go to rehab. And her mother was begging her. And she said that her mother was crying and telling her that she did not want to, she did not want the world, that big old crazy world out there, to take her daughter from her. And she was begging Whitney Houston to go. And they were trying to do an intervention. And Whitney threatened to snatch Bobbi Kristina up and leave the country. She wasn't ready for rehab. But she said that her mother told her, Whitney, if you don't get help, this world out here, this industry, this business that you're in, it's going to destroy you. It's going to take you from me. And that's what happened. You know, exactly what Whitney Houston's mother said happened. Whitney was out there doing her thing, doing drugs, and fucking up her life, y'all. It took me a long time to stop blaming Bobby for everything that happened to Whitney. It took me a long time to stop blaming Whitney for everything that happened with Bobby. Those two together were toxic. And I believe that Whitney Houston was a little bit more involved in drugs than what Bobby was when they got together. And y'all, as a Whitney fan, that bothers me to say that. It hurts me. I remember just laying in my bed with the Whitney Houston CDs in my CD player. CD after CD. I would just load it and lay in the bed, maybe doing my bills or, just trying to go to sleep and listening to her songs. And just her voice, and the words to her song. And just loving that girl, loving her and being proud of, all the accomplishments that she got out there doing her thing, singing. Then I think about when she started to decline. And we would see her in interviews and she would be so skinny and talking all out of her head and drenched in sweat and, acting and behaving erratically. And I remember the very first time that I saw Whitney Houston in this concert on television. And Whitney Houston, y'all, was high as a kite during this concert. And I remember my mother was watching it and she called me. And she said, Rachelle, are you watching this shit? And then I was like, yeah. And she said, that girl is high. And I was sitting there, y'all, and I was like, oh my God, these rumors are true. Now, y'all, this was years ago. I think this probably was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And it was plain to see that this girl was on drugs. And then a few months after that, maybe a year, we saw that Diane Sawyer interview where this girl was just all kind of messed up. And I was sitting there, I was disgusted. Again, angry with her for throwing away that gift that God gave her. And I even felt guilty for being angry at her, if that makes sense to y'all. So it brings me back to her brother. I know her mother has got to be sitting somewhere saying, my kids are fucked up. Do you know, as a mother, that hurts? Now, we might say, well, it's the way she raised them. But at some point, you got to stop blaming your parent. We can't blame Sissy for everything that happened in their lives because, let's face it, you live with your parents, let's give them 21 years. But you spend the most of the time of your life out here in the world. So the world has shaped you. The world has possibly changed, the things that were taught to you when you were growing up. You go out in the world and some people change. They forget everything that they learned growing up. And I believe that Sissy tried to instill in them, to be good people, not to mess with drugs, not to drink like most parents do. But I think the industry that Whitney was in and that Gary was in, because remember, Gary is the brother that used to sing with Whitney. You know, we would always see him in the background. He was one of her background singers. He has a very nice voice too. But they threw all that away, y'all. And as a fan, I don't know. I don't know. Now, here recently, it was Bobby Christina's birthday. And they said that Bobby Brown was on stage somewhere, you know, trying to give a concert. And in the concert, he told the fans that it was his daughter's birthday. And they said he broke down crying. And he was singing Tenderoni. And he had dedicated that song to her memory. You know, Bobby Christina paid dearly for what her parents did. And I hold them both accountable. I hold all of them. Pat Houston, Gary Houston, Michael Houston, Cissy Houston, all of them, Bobby Brown, are the reason why Bobby Christina died. Because it was the life that they exposed that girl to. And it breaks my heart that Bobby Christina, like I said in another video, didn't get to live a life that where she got married and, you know, she was in love and she had babies and gave Bobby some grandkids and, you know, just lived life. That girl lay 5, 6 months in a fucking coma. Though her life slowly just dripping away out of her body until there was nothing left and she left this world. And I blame Whitney and Bobby for that. And y'all, again, as a fan of Whitney and also a fan of Bobby's, it hurts me to say that her parents are the cause of her death. Yes, Nick Gordon was there. Yes, Nick Gordon, there's some suspicion around what happened between him and Bobby Christina. But ultimately, y'all, had Bobby Christina had an upbringing where she didn't watch her parents, her Uncle Gary, her Uncle Michael, all these people around her, dibbling and dabbling in drugs, maybe she would have never touched drugs. Maybe she would have been clear. She would have known that, you know, maybe Nick Gordon is not a good guy for me. You know, maybe if she had watched her mother and father in a loving, normal relationship, she would have known what to choose when she went out there. You know, she would have known, okay, my mother is gone. I need to take some time to grieve and be careful of the people that I bring into my life. And maybe that girl will be here today. Y'all, I want to end this video with this. Again, I want to apologize to Bobby Brown because he's not the reason why Whitney's life ended the way that it did. I believe that Whitney and her brothers were deep in drugs. And I believe that, unfortunately, Whitney couldn't get that monkey off her back. And again, I'm going to say, when she got with Bobby, those two together were toxic for each other. Bobby wasn't just toxic for Whitney. Whitney was toxic for Bobby too. And as a Whitney fan, I just got to face the reality that my girl she was kind of messed up, y'all. And I will forever be a Whitney Houston fan. I still play her songs. I still take time when I hear one of her songs come on the radio. I'll turn it up And, I'll be like, oh, that girl's voice was beautiful. I still do that because I still love her. But I just realized that Whitney wasn't the diva that I thought she was. So as a fan of hers, I don't know. The they talked about the Brown family and how dysfunctional they were. But now I'm realizing, y'all, that just as dysfunctional as the Browns were, the Houstons were too. And proof of that is Gary, found in the car these last few days, unconscious in front of a drug house. People walking by taking pictures of him slumped over, high as a kite, after shooting up some heroin. Ooh, y'all, I don't know. So what I want y'all to do is tell me what you feel about this. Are you like me? Are you finally coming to the conclusion that the the Houstons were drug addicts, y'all? That if all three of them were strung out on drugs, do you understand what I mean when I say, I'm angry with Whitney for throwing away that beautiful voice. I know she couldn't help herself. I know that when you get hooked on drugs, it's hard to get off. I know that. But, oh my God, y'all. This family, oh, it's all messed up. And I know Cissy Houston is sitting somewhere saying, Lord, don't take another one from me. So what I hope is that Gary Houston goes somewhere and gets some help, that his wife, Pat Houston, gets out the limelight, stop fucking with the memory of Whitney, worry about her family, worry about the ones that are left here on earth, before you lose another one. Because it looks like Gary is in trouble right now. So y'all let me know what you think of this. I know I've been rattling on, but when I saw this, I was like, oh my God. Drugs, y'all, that shit ain't nothing to play with. And I am so happy, thankful that I never got involved in anything like that. Because as you can see, it will fuck your life up. And with that, y'all, I'm going to get on out of here. Again, leave your comments down in the comment section because I want to know what other Whitney Houston fans think. It took me a long time, y'all, to get to where I am because, like I said in this video, for years, I was one of those people that was blaming Bobby. And again, I'm going to end my video one more time by saying, Bobby, I am so sorry. Y'all, thank you for watching the video. You have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.